Wow, we're back again. Guys, I don't think when I thought we'd start this, I didn't think we were going to get to like 3 episodes, let alone four. Like, what a record, right?
It's amazing.
I never thought so either. I didn't. I was amazed when we got to one.
Yeah. Hey, like sometimes you just got to say yes, which I guess is what kind of brings us to our topic today, huh?
And we still don't have a sponsor. We don't have a sponsor picked yet. We haven't chosen the one.
I think we're going to be sponsored by like some sort of just hopelessness. Is that
Is that a brand?
that's a brand?
Can we reach out to hopelessness?
I think we could get them on board. I definitely do.
So what's our topic? What do you want to talk about?
Oh, I think our topic is going to be rejection today, right? I think we've talked about sex. We've talked about taboo. We've talked about kink. So the next step in this progression is rejection, right? Got to be.
Makes sense to me.
So rejection is definitely something that I think quite a lot about. There's a particular detail that comes with ADHD called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So whenever I think about the term rejection, I think about that particular aspect for me, which is it's an interesting detail because rejection sensitivity dysphoria means that like you will perceive rejection and you'll feel it very strongly, but you may even perceive it when it's not actually a thing. It's not actually happening, or you will perceive that it's happening a lot more like vehemently. You feel it a lot stronger. So like there are times in my day, like, and this happens every day, where like I'll actually kind of feel a pain because I'm like, oh, because I will spiral onto something where I think that like, somebody is saying something and it has really nothing to do with me, but I'm taking it that way.
What'd you call it? Did you have a name for it? Did you say that, or am I?
So yeah, the symptom as far as ADHD is concerned is called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, and dysphoria basically means that like, oh man, I'm gonna define a word without actually looking it up. So let's actually get to the actual definition of dysphoria.
Yeah, go to Googs
Right.
and see.
So dysphoria is a state of unease or generalized dissatisfaction with life. But when we attach it to a particular detail, it means that you have this unease and general like negative feeling about a particular topic. So for me, it's rejection sensitivity, where like I have this feeling of rejection.
Is there like, are we talking about a specific realm of rejection or just kind of a general rejection?
That's a good thing to bring up. So a lot of people, when they think about rejection, they think about it primarily in regard to romantic relationships. But when I think about rejection, I think about it in any kind of interpersonal relationship. So like it is particularly difficult for me at my work. Like, when I have a job, if I sense that like, something like maybe I'm working on a project and, my boss walks by and maybe I've laid it out in like red and yellow or something like that. And he comes in and he says like, well, I like blue. I'll be like, my next thought is I'm going to be fired. And that's not a logical projection or progression there. Like the thing is just like, oh, he's telling me what he likes. But in my brain, I'm like, how did I not know that he liked blue? And why didn't I set this out in blue? And why didn't I ask that question ahead of time? And how could I be so stupid to allow this to happen this late in the project? Why didn't I get this stuff up front? So it like creates this spiral. And so for me, when I get those types of feelings, it's very important for me to try to stay calm, because sometimes, I mean, and like the kicker here is sometimes you're actually being rejected, and rejection does hurt, but like to try and discern whether or not, oh, is this actual rejection or is this just something I'm perceiving? Is this just a pain in the moment?
So I suffer from this too.
Yep.
To an extreme degree. And I've suffered from it most of my life without having a word for it. And it's amazing to me to learn so much about myself so quickly, but like it's always been there. So it's like an explanation to why, like if you don't respond to me and it's like, it's been a day, I assume you're never going to talk to me again.
Yeah.
Like that's my rational thought is that you are going to leave me forever.
Hmm.
But it's irrational. I call it, but that's what my brain interprets the fact that I'm no longer a part of your life. Otherwise, why didn't you respond? What did I say to make you upset? Or, so that's it's a crazy, I don't want to use the word crazy. It's a difficult thing to deal with.
You know, my first thought was that it actually could be rational. That's the thing. Like, it's not
Yeah.
rational, but it could. I mean, maybe they are going to leave. And really, the issue then gets to that has to be okay. It has to be okay that if someone were to reject you, that you can accept it and still move on.
Yeah.
I'm probably I'm jumping ahead,
So
but
that's kind
that would.
of, I think that that's kind of like, so so I'm neurodiverse, right? In that regard, with ADHD, the way that my brain works is a little different than like the neurotypical. As far as like, well, I got to be all right with like people leaving me, and I used to like really go hard on that idea. But what that eventually does is like people with rejection sensitivity dysphoria actually they kind of go two routes. They either become people pleasers because they're constantly trying to please everyone so that they don't leave, or they stop trying altogether because it's like, well, they're all going to leave me anyways. I got to be all right with it. So I'm just going to be fine with this person not liking me, and that's going to be okay. And then, like, I mean, in some regards, I'll even have these moments where, like, well, if they're going to leave me, I want them to like walk out on my terms, or at least like I have some sort of control over it. So at least I earned it, like something like that. And those perceptions, they're not always true. And like I think a lot of the reason why is because like an ADHD brain, the way that we process information is like we don't really have a filter on the information that comes in. So like when you're going through your regular day, data will come in kind of like through channels, and you'll know, oh, I got to act on this and this and that and the other thing. But with ADHD, everything's coming in all at once, so we are overloaded with data. But what eventually happens is when we catch up, we put the data model together and we get pattern recognition, and it comes across as intuition. So we tend to be pretty good at reading people, but when we're reading different details and we have a negative interaction, we're assembling all these little disparate details and putting them together. And then if we're in the wrong state of mind or we're having a bad day, it just turns into, well, that one time when they looked across the room while we were talking, it was probably because I was talking too much. So they're tuning out, and I'm boring them right now, and this is just going to keep happening. So it's probably good that they're gone. And then you just kind of throw your hands up, and it's like this all the time.
Do you think that it's fair to say, because and this is where my mind is do you think it's fair to say that everyone deals with this on some level? Of course, there's people that probably are hypersensitive, like what you're explaining, but everyone has that in their head, and everyone has that fear of
You
not
bet.
being accepted or
Of course,
whatever.
you bet. I think that this is so there's a reason why, like, when I talk about ADHD and I try to explain it to people in general, like I'll basically say it's the human condition turned up to 11. Because a lot of people can understand what it's like to have parts of this, but they don't understand what it's like to have it at the level that it becomes this trait, or it is diagnosed as a disorder. So it is. A lot of this stuff does seem pretty understandable, and it's like, oh yeah, I've felt that once before. But like when you don't have a sense of control or an ability to dial it back, is when it becomes difficult. So like for instance, like with ADHD, I can focus on things, I just don't have control over what I can focus on. I can focus very, very well, in fact, too much, in fact, but like I can't point it in the right directions oftentimes. So when your sense of stimulation is emotional and you have a pain response, you will focus on it. I mean, much like we talked about with kink last week, with like, spanking being a pain response that causes you to focus on the here and now. If you are in emotional pain and it is from rejection, you will focus on it. And if you don't have the ability to distract yourself from it and focus on another task, you will spiral on it. So like that's why there is a high instance of like, like depression as like an extension of ADHD, because this rejection sensitivity dysphoria it's highly prevalent with people with ADHD.
Yeah, because I tend to feel like a huge purpose of life is connection, is connecting with people, and rejection is like the opposite of that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when like that's why I feel like it is something that everyone deals with on, and they deal with it on varying levels. They respond to it in various ways. I think sometimes you get you might see someone who seems very arrogant, but that stems from a place of fear of rejection.
Of
you
course.
know they're actually very fragile, and they've chosen to deal with it by being a tough person, and a overly high view of self.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, that's called masking, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what people do whenever they're in a situation where they have to operate, but they either have feelings or thoughts or fears, emotions, whatever it's going to be that's going to make you feel unsettled. You'll mask so that you can fit into the situation, or that you can find a way to get out of it in some sort of coping mechanism, or that you can manage it. So like there are times when like I will put on the mask, like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm fine, it's cool, it's all right. Like hey, there's times when I don't like people. It's fine for people to not like me, but like on the inside, you're just kind of like, why don't they like me? I mean, like,
Right.
for me, like, honestly, for me, like, I'm all right with people not liking me, but I want to know that if like that there was some truth to it. Like if they're fine with like sometimes I'm kind of obnoxious, or maybe like the fact that like for
You're not
me,
obnoxious. You just have a big personality.
yeah, yeah.
Hey, you got to smile at me. Good for you, Ty.
Mhm, mhm. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting detail, because like you put on these masks to try and like function in the moment or with particular people, and it's difficult. And also it, you get so used to wearing the masks that it's hard to take them back off again. And then you get in this situation where like if you don't have like a safe space or someone that you can be vulnerable with, that if you don't have like an area where you can be true, you feel like you're trapped within these masks and that no one knows you, and that
Mm-hmm.
can lead to real despair. So the way that I fight this sort of thing personally, because like I feel this very like every day to some extent or another, is I try to practice being vulnerable and being very very truthful about everything all the time. Like I mean, it's one of the reasons like I guess one of the hallmarks of me on this show is like I just kind of tell you guys the truth of what's going on, and like some of the stuff that I've like already communicated on this show is kind of embarrassing, or maybe others might think it's more embarrassing, but like I don't know, like when I think about it, like I kind of think about my dad, and he was just the kind of fellow that, like he would fart and burp wherever the hell he was, and then like he didn't seem to care, but like I mean I know he did, but I think he just kind of gave up on caring about whether or not people liked him or not, because he could spiral too much on it. That's my guess. I could be projecting. I mean, he never told me that, and I'll never know. But like I know for me that the more I am truthful in the moment
Mm-hmm.
and like straightforward and give myself time to breathe, like especially if I get that pain, that stabbing pain where it's just like, oh, I'm really rejected, is to because like in the moment, like the other aspect of ADHD is this really it's kind of a 1-2 punch. Is the impulse control. And when under pain, you want to do something about it. You want to take action. You want to soothe yourself. You want to get out of the situation. Maybe like I'll flee from a situation sometimes, but like oftentimes the right thing to do is to just sit there and try to remain calm. And that's hard to do.
I am working on it. I'm still at the point where I've started piecing together my why, my origin story as to what got me to this point, and that was something that happened this week for me, and I've been living in it, and I'm still there. Obviously, I don't. I'm not giving off the same energy I have in other episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I had shut down communication with my mom for like at least 6 months, talking to her, and touch was gone for at least 2 years. And this is a person who's been around me for 330 days. And so I finally reached my breaking point when I saw an empty box on the hood of her car outside. That was all it took. I know it was off topic, but
Mm-hmm.
that was my origin story to bring me inside to go, like, how many times do I have to ask to like not leave stuff outside like that? I think it's tacky, and I purchased a house so that I wouldn't have tacky stuff outside like you always have. And I was very open about where this was. And she was like, "Oh, you're getting angry," and tried to walk away. And I was like, "Don't do that to me. Like, I need to discuss this. Like, I'm upset and I want to talk about it. And that's okay."
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, "No, you're angry, and you want to talk to me now? You haven't talked to me in 6 months." I'm like, "I do. And this is why I can't talk to you, because when this starts, you get angry and run away." And so that's what I've learned, is that before I get rejected, I can just run away, and I control that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even the icing on the breaking of my back. That's the beginning of the conversation. I just don't want to hog this whole show with that.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you that, like, I mean, I was diagnosed with ADHD, almost like probably 10 years ago, maybe 11. So I was diagnosed as an adult, and like, not that I couldn't have been diagnosed as a child. That's a story for another time. Like all of the signs that were there all throughout my life, where maybe I could have gotten help earlier, but like, I didn't find out about rejection sensitivity dysphoria as like a collection of behaviors, and they have finally grouped them together. And this is an actual symptom of ADHD, and we know it is, and we know that it's highly prevalent, but we just didn't realize like what it was. I don't think that I found out about that until 2 years ago, and I've read it. I read it in an article. It was like on this. There's this online website about ADHD. It's called Attitude, ADDITUDE. And I like went on there and I read it. And there's articles, and I read it, and I was just like, oh, this is exactly me. And then I sat in a room and bawled for like 15 minutes straight, and I couldn't come out of the room for 20 because I got done crying. I was just like, and like the 5 minutes after, I was just like trying to put myself back together. And I realized while I was putting myself back together, I'm trying to put the masks back on so I can go back out to work. And I was like, oh, I'm doing it again, or still, or more. And I just, and then everything for the weeks after, I was just like, trying to piece it together. And like, I started asking questions, and like, was there medication for this? And like, or like, how do I fix this? Do I go to talk therapy? And like, talk therapy, like they've actually said this, like, yeah, talk therapy is good for like piecing things together to heal after. But like in the moment when you are feeling it, the feeling is so like painful, like it's so acute that like trying to be mindful about it, which mindfulness for ADHDers is already kind of difficult, but trying to be mindful in the moment it's a Herculean task. It's very difficult because you'll feel it, and then you're just like, what do I do with this? And like, like where you want to be calm, you want to be like, take a moment and maybe assess, like, is this my actual perception, or is this reality? But
Can we talk about that though? Like,
do.
what if it's real? Like, what if you're not wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what if
mm-hmm.
what if there is a part that is true, that it's like you did offend somebody and they're not telling you?
Hmm.
And it's like you're reading into that because like that's what that means is the game that you've played your whole life.
Exactly. I mean, like, and I know for me, like, I've just gotten to the point where, like, I start asking questions, or I try to be as honest as possible. So I'll just be like, hey, I don't know if this is true, but I just want to ask if this is it. And, like, what ends up happening for me is, like, there are other people who are all on board with playing the truth game, and they will be honest with me. And those are the people that, like, even if I have a bad interaction with them, like I can loop back with them at some other time, maybe send them a message, or there'll be like an open dialogue, or they'll reread something that I said, and then they'll close the loop later. And like those interactions, God, like they're few and far between, but boy, do I appreciate them. Like I've had like one of those instances like fairly recently where like I said something, and then there was a text message kind of exchange after the fact, and like we got to the end of it and it was good. And then they sent me a message the next day and thanked me that I went through this, and I was like, wow, man, if I could have that with more people, that would be great. But then there are other people who I'll ask them honestly, and they won't give me the truth back, and eventually it does come out, because the truth does come out. That's the way that that's the thing about it. Truth comes out, and eventually you do find out, and then you're just like, well, you could have told me this whole time. And like, I don't know, eventually what happens for me is I end up having a boundary. I have a boundary with people who can either just be radically honest with me, or they can't. And if they can't be radically honest with me, then I struggle.
So there's some work to be done on really understanding that other person. So like, because to be honest, like there are probably some people that just have their own issues to deal with before they will be able to be honest with someone.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't force that to happen.
That's right.
But one key piece is one key factor in someone not being open and honest in a dialogue is going to be if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel like this conversation is going to be safe, um, or there's no trust there. Like you have to have trust that they're
Mm-hmm.
going to be able to say what they want to say, and that it's not going to they're not going to get their head bitten off, or it's not going to come back to haunt them. So there has to be this like mutual trust when that dialogue's happening. I don't, in some ways I feel like you have to do the groundwork there before you can just run up to someone and just tell them your honest feelings. You have to be sensitive to the idea that you need to make sure that you create an environment that's safe, and that they know that it's safe to be there. And then at some point, I've said this actually recently to someone, where it's like, all you can really control is that your door is open. Your door of communication is open. You can't open their door for you. Someone once painted the picture for me, like you're in a adjoining hotel rooms, with that door.
Mm-hmm.
You can open your door, but you can't make them open their door. But you can make sure that your door is open when their door opens. Like, and so if it, so it's like, so there's this, I don't know. It's a
No, Jordan, I think you're hitting the nail like square on the head. Like I think that you're really hitting a very good point here in this regard, in like in creating a safe place where people can be truthful with you. But like so, for instance, personal story, like in my last long-term relationship, like there were some problems. I'm not talking about, I was married, and then after I was married, I had like another long-term relationship about 6 years, and we were engaged. But and we lived together, but like, I checked with her after the fact, and I asked her some questions, and she said it just seemed like you were fragile about certain things, because like with the ADHD, like I would forget stuff, like small mundane things, like putting the dishes away, and it would stress her, and it was like kind of hard to live with in that regard. And like, because she'd be like, hey, you left the dishes out again, and then I would go, fuck. I would have this immediate thing, because I'd get upset with myself over these little things that I would miss. And I'm like, why can't I get the small stuff done? Why can I always be great in a crisis or do the big project, but the little things I struggle with? And I would react, but like the way that she took that in was like, oh, he's fragile about the little things. How can I talk to him about something big? And it was
Mhm.
wrong. Like, I mean, it's the exact reverse with a person like me, where like a big detail, like you can bring to me and I will calm right the fuck down. I'll be like, all right, it's crisis time. Let's do this the most healthiest way possible. But like, it wasn't like we didn't have that framework. We didn't have those
Mhm.
perspectives to know that like the safe place was there. So it has to be like, I mean, like if you want to work in a realm of truth with people, you do have to kind of do the work of being a caring individual, right? And try
But
to try to present being safe. It's hard.
it goes back to the thing though, like what if you tell them something about yourself and they're going to leave you because of it, because they're going to judge you because that's weird, you know what I mean? Like you're a weird person and you have weird things that you say and people don't understand that, and so you say weird things. I don't
Mhm.
know, like I still have that issue.
Well, it's kind of like, like when we're a kid, right? Your parents would say, well, if your friends say that you got to break the rules, then they're not your really friends, or like that sort of thing. Like this idea that like you need to surround yourself with people who can handle the true you, right? But that's hard to do.
Right. I mean, it takes trust. Like you can't just expect. Unfortunately, you can't just expect to just walk up to someone that you don't know very well and just start telling them the brutal truth. Like, eh, and because there's work to be done all around. Like, there's a difference between. I was just reading a quote the other day. Like, there's a difference between talking to someone and talking at someone, and and what we actually want is talking with someone. Like that's what the conversation. So if you approach them to tell them the truth, or but you're talking to them or at them, that's different than having a dialogue with them, and
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's feeling safe and accepting of they're ready to hear the truth and are ready to share the truth.
I think for me, like like I speak about this from time to time, but like this idea of vulnerability, right? Like when I'm embracing vulnerability, my defenses come down, and I'm generally a more pleasant person to deal with. Uh, and I like that. I like vulnerable Tyson. It reminds me of like the parts of me that I love the most. Like I love, like I call the best part of me Parker's dad. I really love that guy
Mhm.
because like he's vulnerable. He stops and listens. He that sort of stuff. He's the man that I want to be. And being vulnerable with people all the time, out in public, in your daily life, whether or not you're professional, personal, whatever, it's a better state for me. But when you're vulnerable, that's exactly what you are. You're vulnerable. And like there are times when I am vulnerable with people and then they go right on and they hurt me. Sometimes I have to be all right with getting hurt by them
Right.
and just trying to stay calm because like the fact of the matter is like the pain of being actually hurt from someone while I'm being vulnerable, while it hurts in the moment, at least that pain's more real and easier to manage than the pain of what's going on inside my mind when I'm second guessing all the time.
Mhm.
So like the idea of trying to be vulnerable Tyson as much as possible and being all right that sometimes I'm gonna take a hit on it, and I have, like, but it's a lot less frequent than I thought it would be.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, you got to be able to look yourself in the mirror, right? And and love yourself. And let's
Which
be
is hard.
honest. Let's be
That's
honest.
hard to do.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes we deserve to be rejected for something we said. You know, I was on a first date once. This was in high school, and I chose, I chose to say a joke. It had something to do with homosexual aliens. Um, something like if aliens were homosexuals, how would we even know, or something like that. And I thought it was an interesting conversation. Never heard from her again. And I probably deserve that.
She was probably a gay alien. Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, she was just triggered by the fact that like you were calling her a homosexual because she was an alien. It's just.
But seriously, like there is a point in this conversation. We need to get to that place where it's like, yeah, you're going to get rejected. Sometimes it's going to happen, and it might be valid. It might be that someone is leaving you, and you might feel like rejection. Maybe they're healthier than that, and they're just putting boundaries in place, but it feels like rejection to you. Like, and it's not like when I first made that comment earlier, you kind of, Tyson, your response was kind of like, it was almost more extreme than what I was meaning. It's like, it's not like you just go around saying, it's okay, but it's more of like, you have to work to build your self-confidence that some people aren't going to like you. Some people aren't healthy enough to deal with, they're not able to have that conversation. So when you're opening up, you say something that maybe is whatever, it rubs them the wrong way, they run for the hills. We all have that feeling, because I think we're all kind of saying that everyone has this kind of runaway disconnect thing when things get tough and things get stressful, and I know for myself, and I think for most people, disconnecting and isolating is not healthy for me. It's not what I want. I have had to tell myself, I've had to look myself in the mirror and say, Jordan, you do not disconnect from this. Mm-hmm. You lean into it, take the punches, take the heat, have the conversations. It's the only way forward. But not everyone's going to do that. Some people are going to listen to the voice saying disconnect, run away. And you have to understand that you're capable of doing that too. And get to a place where you can be all right that they did that to you. Not all right, like it's okay, but like,
I think
move on, kind of like.
I definitely think you're touching on a topic here that is very important. Like, it becomes easier to take your vulnerability with you out and allow people to like have access to the soft cuddly bits, right? It's easier to do that when you practice it, but it's also easier to do that when you have some sort of sense of at least one relationship in your life where like that at least one person sees the vulnerable person who you are and they accept it. And a lot of the times it builds off of kind of a positive track record. But it's hard if you're left by yourself and you don't have the one thing to go, you don't have the safe place to like build from, and you're stuck without a foundation, and then you're still supposed to be vulnerable. Like, where do you go when you hurt? Like when we feel feelings of fear, like sometimes people use anger to cope. But like realistically, like when you feel fear, you should cope by like seeking comfort and security instead of smashing the thing that is making you feel afraid. But too often when we don't have a place that makes us feel secure, comforted, and all right, we're only left with smash the thing that makes us feel that way. So a lot of this stuff starts with one person, right? Having one relationship where you feel that you can be honest, right? So like it's tough. It's really tough. And like when you're going through it and you're realizing it the kind of first time, right? Like that's when it starts to break you down, because you start looking around like, shit, fuck, nobody knows me, right?
And that's when you can feel really lonely, even when you're in a crowd of people.
At the end of the day, you're by yourself. You are alone. At the end of the day, you are alone. Inside your head and inside this world, you are alone.
Yeah.
That's it. You're gonna die alone. No one's dying with you. You die alone.
And it's I
Is
mean,
that
like,
the bit? You
yeah,
gotta change that bit.
it could be, but like the fact of the matter is like what happens for me is it's been a few years now, or 2 years of like trying to like really deal with this topic and realize like how much of my life has been me just reacting to this thing and telling myself I can't have this thing, I can't have this type of person in my life, I can't have, and like just walling myself off from like different sources of pain and that sort of thing. And like honestly, like it's hard, especially when you're like I mean, I have that kind of those moments of like, everything's meaningless and that sort of shit.
Mhm.
Like, I mean, that's my default worrying. That's actually probably the closest thing that I believe. But at the same time, I like my life better when I choose to think of it as like, I like interacting with people. I like doing these things, and I just like it better. I might not believe that it matters, but that doesn't matter. But who cares? I want to
It's
do
not
it the
even
way that I
about
like it.
it's not even about liking it. It fills me up. Like I need that connection in it builds me. Like
Mhm.
I can't I feel like I can't live without it. And
Well,
when go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. I just feel strongly because I wanted to comment because I felt like you said something and I kind of laughed about it, and I wanted to kind of explain my laughter because I wasn't laughing at it when you said we die alone, we are alone, kind of a thing, because I want to actually talk about that because I think that how you said that sounds very morbid, you know, and there's I think there's some truth. There is some truth to that idea, but I also think that it's not there's more to it than that because I think we're connected. I don't think I wouldn't go around. I wouldn't say that I am alone and I die alone. I think that we are all connected, and so you're not alone. There's a piece of me in you, Alex. There's and it will always be.
It's the tip. The tip is in. The tip is in right now.
Even if it's just the tip.
Like
Is that
honestly,
why I'm
it's
crying?
in you.
Yeah. I mean, like next time, like let him like loosen up a little bit before you get right in there. It's just
But I mean, you think about it, and like a lot of like the groundwork. I'm not an expert at this, so this isn't the Kelton and Brad podcast. But when you think about like some of the groundwork they're doing in quantum physics and stuff like that, like there are some very interesting things that I think have very interesting life implications. And some of that stuff, I've been trying to dive into it but I'm just not smart enough and don't have a lot of time. But like, but that's kind of like part of it is like how things are connected, and like and we're not, this is maybe a topic for another day, but it will, if I go down this road, it'll start talking about some of my beliefs, my spiritual beliefs, my beliefs about God and what that is, and not religion, not that. I'm talking about God. I'm talking about spiritual things here, but like, but there is a connection between us. Is what I believe, and so so when you die and you're alone in your head, you're not alone. None of us are alone. We are all one. Man, very hippie thing to say, maybe, but like we are all one. We are all made from the same things. The whole universe is made out of. It's like we're all connected.
I
oh
believe that. We all bleed red. You know what I mean? Like we
well
all bleed the same color as far as the connection goes for me. I know it's a literal definition of it, but it's we're all the same in that fact, and I do believe that. But I guess for me, I was saying I get trapped in my own head,
mm-hmm,
and that's my reality that
mm-hmm,
spins me into this like
mm-hmm.
horrible place of filling the gap for everyone ever that has ever said anything to me my entire life. And it's so nice to have that open communication. Like Lauren is one of those people that I feel comfortable now. Like when I say something that if it's going to upset her, she's going to tell me instead of me having to figure out whether or not she's upset with me.
Yeah, definitely.
And I
I mean,
appreciate that.
yeah. I mean, like, so like, I do want to like kind of bookend on something, and I do think that we're going to have a what's the bit with like God, religion, magic, whatever the fuck we're going to call it. But like, I think we're skirting around this issue or touching upon this topic of like all three of us feel that there is an element of existence that is outside of like who we are, like inside our own person and the body that we are. Like, and like, I think that like there's this really kind of interesting detail. Like my favorite author like kind of mentioned this in one or many of his books, but like this idea that like any technology that is sufficiently advanced enough, if you take it like back in time, and like primitive culture like interacted with it, their only explanation of that technology would be that's magic. And I kind of think about like what that would be with us moving forward. Like what happens if like these feelings that we have between each other, like we say that there's an energy, or we're calling it God, or maybe it's spiritualism, or maybe it's just the vibrations, or it's like we have this kind of feeling, but like the fact of the matter is like our senses, we're limited people, we're viewing the world through a haze. uh Maybe someday there'll be like the spectrometer that reads alpha brainwaves or some weird thing, and it can tell, oh yeah, there's this discernible detail, and now we know what it is. It's measurable, and we can gauge it of why and how people connect. But for us, we don't know what that is. But we don't. For me, I don't need to know what that is to be able to know that there's something more than what I am. I don't
Mhm.
really care what it's called anymore.
Right.
Like maybe I look at the world through like a lens of like Lutheran Christianity because that's the way I was raised. But like I don't really care if I call it that at all, fucking at all. Like I just know that like there are people that I have a connection to, and I feel like I can read, and that maybe like and that person that I can trust the words coming out of their mouth. Like even if they're negative or something like that, I can trust and read that, and then like so I guess what it comes down to, I guess the bit here with rejection is to trust your gut, maybe.
I I don't know if
But
that's
like
the
my
bit for
gut, I
me
mean, I
because
have diarrhea a lot, so who knows?
because
I don't.
my gut. Oh, okay, I've got that problem too.
I think it's around trust. I think there's a trust piece to it.
But I cut you off, Alex. Expand. You let me know
Um,
if that's for it for you.
the gut. Because like we talked about, like what if you're wrong? You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the information, and it's like I do believe that most of the time my gut is telling me the correct information, but it may not be
Yeah.
the right information because logically there's a truth that I've
Right.
blanketed because my gut is telling me something else.
Yes. Okay. So let me reword.
Please.
Trust your gut after you have gone back through like emotional equilibrium. So for me,
Okay.
I find my emotional equilibrium is after I wake up. So if I'm going through something, no matter what I do, I have to go to sleep because I will hyper focus on this stimuli. And like this idea of like don't go to bed angry. That's the worst fucking thing you can say in the world to me because I will just stay up and I will write email. Like, I'll put it into words how upset and angry I am about this, that, and the other thing. But like sometimes the right thing for me to do is to just power it down, go to sleep, try to come back into it, and then reassess. Like, okay, why am I angry? Okay, it's this. All right, do I still have this feeling? Is the pain like continuing? Okay, well then I have something to do with it, or has it subsided? And maybe that was just but like realistically, for me, I do spend a lot of time uh, doing sanity checks. I have at least a couple
What does that
people.
mean?
So I have a couple people that I will just say, this is the stuff that I'm going through. This is the way that I'm feeling. Am I mean, I'll just cut straight to the thing, but this isn't the words that you should probably use, but like, am I crazy? And they'll be like, yeah. you're crazy about this, Ty. You need to like try to see it from their viewpoint. And I'll be like, okay. And I trust them enough, and they trust me enough to know that that's not going to upset me. And then other times they're like, yeah, I can see why you're upset. I might not be as upset as you are, but I know that that's the cost of doing business with you, Tyson. It's worth it.
But if you don't trust them, then maybe they're still not telling you the truth, though. So then what's the point?
Well, that's why I said like it all comes down to like having that one. It starts with one person, right? Taking that leap of faith, having a leap of faith with one.
Yeah, it well, and where I got to with the bit is trust your gut, but know that it can be wrong. Like like I mean, everyone can be wrong. Like even your friend that you trust can fail you. Like there has to be some grace all around. There has to be an understanding that, yeah, you thought you could trust someone. You said something to them. They did run away, and there has to be, you have to be able to show them grace. Like they are we're all in our own like place on this journey, dealing with things that no one else knows, you know. And so you gotta have you gotta keep the cement wet is a term I've been using lately, where it's like don't let things harden. Don't
what company are you working for?
don't let your beliefs harden. Take in the information, have beliefs, but the moment you start saying that it's a concrete block that can't move, is the moment there's a problem. Like new information can come in all the time. People can change. Someone can come back and say, I disconnected because I needed my space, and now I'm back. You viewed it as disconnecting, and I did disconnect. It's true. I wanted to say screw you, but I thought about it, and now I'm back. And because I need you to have that allowance for me to just be a human that makes mistakes and doesn't have things together every second of every day.
So I want to say tangibly for me what the bit with rejection is the board game Sorry, because you're in a relationship with these people, and the goal is to get all of your pegs to the end, but you're supposed to do it with other people, and there are going to be times where they step on you and send you back into your place. And it's like, whether or not you were ready for that, that's still, you may take that as rejection, but that was just the cards that was dealt.
Yeah, that triggers a lot of thoughts in me. I can tell you that the people in my life that stick around are always the ones that can hear me say the words, I'm sorry. And that they will go through the ritual of forgiving me. And I will ritualize it. I'll be like, I would like to be forgiven. They're like, yeah, it's no big deal. I'm like, no, like, I mean, I would like you to say that I'm forgiven because that's meaningful to me. And they'll be like, okay, well, you're forgiven. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then when they come to me and say they're sorry, like, I'm always like, you're forgiven. It's all right. But let's try and like talk about what we need to do about this, what, that, and the other thing. But like I do struggle with people who don't have a spirit of forgiveness, don't know how to extend grace, don't have, like holding grudges, that sort of stuff. Like those people are hard for me. They're really hard for me.
And let's be clear that you can have boundaries. You can forgive and have boundaries.
That's true.
Forgive does not mean that you have to trust them with your life again. Like you can put things in place to not get burned.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah. And I agree with that. Like, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Cause it's just like, I mean, like I'm having problems with my mom. I have for like a year. Well, actually, much longer than that. But I haven't spoken to her in a year. She hasn't seen, like it's interesting that like, one bad president in a pandemic can destroy relationships.
So that's a big part of compassion for me, because I felt that from a lot of people in their families, the baby boomer generation, really sticking with their guns, if you will, not on purpose for that term, but to be able to produce all these loving and compassionate beings, regardless of political parties, is it was so abundant in so many of my friends' relationships, and their parents stopped talking to them.
Mhm.
And,
I mean,
and
like,
for what? Because you're compassionate towards everyone, in a sense, like because of your viewpoint of humanity.
yeah, it's interesting detail because like I know that like for my mom, like this is me projecting or me making statements that I believe are true about my mom, but like I mean she was going to disagree with this. So I mean I shouldn't just label her this way, but I believe or I feel that she is very vested in a sense of feeling like she's right. Like she associates it to being good and bad, and like she wants to be on the good side. She wants to be a good person who does the right thing, makes the right decisions. Like she likes that duality, like the Star Wars. She wants to be a Jedi. She really does. But like when we have a world of grace, and like sometimes there isn't right and wrong. Sometimes there's just stuff in the middle, and like that's a struggle to her. And when we get into these conversations, and then she starts associating things that from people who she trusts, and like there's this tangential aspect of like, oh well, now because this person that I believe says this, then I also must believe that their things are good, and like it just extends, and there's this polarization. Well, anyways, like
Rejection.
we know where it's going, but like like she's rejecting everything that I'm standing for because she has somehow labeled a number of the things that I cling to as wrong. So therefore, I as a person am wrong, and therefore she can't accept me. It's hard. It's hard to hear from someone. I love you, but, and you can finish that sentence
Right.
however you want, but you hear I love you, but pretty much front after that sentence is fucking garbage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's that's something that I've learned in the recent past as well, where as soon as there's strings attached to that love, it ain't love, man. Like that's just not.
Mm-hmm.
If it's dependent on anything, what I mean, that's
It's tough to deal with. I mean, like, and I think that's we're gonna take a deep cut back to like previous episodes. We talked about like what is unconditional love or what is conditional love. Like, I think that love is conditional, but like, and then it's all right to say what those conditions are so that you know where like how you're interacting with somebody. Like my mom's conditional love with me is she loves me as long as she believes that she's gonna be able to see me in heaven. But the way that she believes is that if I don't go to church the way that she does, is that I'm not going to be there with her. So from a very defensive standpoint, why would you want to connect with someone and form a deeper attachment with somebody who's not going to join you in the afterlife?
Mm.
Like I can understand why she is drawing away. I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it.
Anna suggests what the bit was. If you guys, she said, is the bit accepting rejection?
Yeah, I mean, in some regards it is, because like, I mean, isn't that kind of how we put up borders? Where we're talking about like sometimes you have to put up boundaries with people. You accept that things are going to happen.
yeah. I mean, I think it's accepting it and also, but being ready for that reconciliation too. Understanding that.
I love that idea. I love having hope.
Well, like because rejection doesn't have to be final. Yeah, you could have been rejected, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be final. And you can't control the other side, but you can control that you're preparing yourself for a day when that comes, and even if it never comes. Why is it laughing?
I'm not laughing. I'm breathing.
So in this regard, like honestly, if my mom stays wet, I mean changeable, like then she'll be able to accept me back. But while she's not, I mean, she's rigid. Like
I also think there's a bit that was a theme today that was around finding people that you do connect with, that you can
Yeah.
have that vulnerability with. And interesting, like this week I watched this. So the bit for me would be like a monkey experiment, because I saw this clip and they were talking about this experiment that people were doing with monkeys, and they whether whether this is humane or not is not the point.
I'm hanging on every word.
But they had a monkey in a cage, and they induced they were measuring his stress levels, and they introduced him to a lot of stress. So like flashy lights, loud music, crazy things, and they were measuring the stress levels, and the stress levels were tangible, like measurable, and stuff. they then kept the same stress things. They didn't change anything about the stress that they were introducing to the monkey. All they did was open the cage and add a second monkey, close the cage, and the stress levels on that monkey reduced 50% just by having a buddy with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a strong thing to just getting through life, getting through rejection, and having someone there with you, just and being that person for someone else, just being a buddy when they're dealing with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. The times when I have that connection, it doesn't seem as hard to deal with. You know, like it still may be difficult, sure, but to have that person to kind of to give some of the burden to, I guess, emotionally is important in order to deal with whatever your stress is.
Definitely. I mean, I think that like the picture that you painted there of like, it wasn't just that you had a buddy. They added another monkey to the same situation, so the same situation that was vulnerable. So they're vulnerable to the same things that you are, and they're in the same exact situation you are. So it feels like they're walking in your shoes. Like every time I've had
Fair
like
point.
a disagreement with somebody that I worked with, like if I got to the point where like I can't fucking stand like Tanner over there because like he's such a dick, and like but like if I take Tanner out for lunch, and I can find just one thing that we have some sort of similarity where I can bond with him, or maybe I can like ask him something, and we're in more of a vulnerable like space where he doesn't feel like he's got to defend like his position at his job. We're just out at lunch. Who gives a fuck? Like if I can find something that I can resonate with him on, like maybe I don't have to walk a whole mile in his shoes, but if I can at least like, try him on for size and see what they're like this idea of not just having a friend, but having a friend who makes you feel like they're with you, or at least trying to understand the same situation you are in. Like we all have friends, but like there are moments where we get into like a relationship with a friend where they see something that they didn't like about us, and then they didn't take the time to find out what it was really about. And that's when we feel the most judged. Mm-hmm. Like if you can just say, hey, look, there's this thing you don't know about me. I'm going to show it to you. And if you're in your knee-jerk reaction, I can't believe you're fucking doing that. And you're like, oh God, it's stab, twist. And then you just feel like you're going to be dead. But if somebody says, well, I don't know what that is, but instead they sit down calmly and be like, why don't you tell me about it?
Mm-hmm.
That's so much better.
Well, yeah. And also getting tools to deal with that. So because we live in a world of millions of people that's how they respond to things. Mm-hmm. And it's just how they are. And they are either because they're ignorant, they don't know better, or because they're dealing with stuff. And to be able to, maybe there's an extended conversation on another one of these where we identify some tools when that happens. Like, how do you bring control? Like, and some of it's very stupid, probably, like just about your tone of voice. So like you, Tyson, like if they're flying off the handle, if you can just bring back the conversation to, hey, I know something I said just bothered you. Can we sit down and talk about it? And like, because then we can get into like mirror neurons too, like this idea that you kind of reflect the same thing, same energy as the person you're talking with.
I think it's difficult though to have those conversations via text based though.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And that's been so
Mhm.
prevalent in my life the last couple of weeks that like nobody seems to want to like visually speak, and
Mhm.
I can't communicate what I'm saying properly via text. And almost everybody in my life knows that I leave words out of sentences and that I misspell words. And like, honestly, for the most part, people know what I'm saying, but they assume they know what I'm saying.
Yeah, like that's definitely something I learned over 2020 because so much of our text became our communication became virtual, and like I realized that like when I write, because I have like a mental game that goes on that has to do with insecurity with the way like I almost failed high school. So like when I write, I hyperanalyze what I'm writing, and I don't want to like be the stupid kid I thought I was in high school. So like I write more professionally. That you don't really see kind of who I am, and then people, because it's such a departure from my normal cadence, the way that I speak, that they're just like, well, he must be mad. And then they start associating things that
Right.
aren't there. And I'm just like, like the one thing that has been nice about like, say, platforms like TikTok or like this particular, like this interaction with this podcast, I can see you guys.
Mm.
It helps.
I mean, when we take all of the data about like our face is meant to communicate. It's why we have all these muscles and why it moves and like all of these different things. And when we just decide, oh, we're gonna rip all of that away, and then we're just gonna make your brain do all the work with just these glyphs, and you're gonna make sense of them without tone, content, like where the person's coming from, their general feeling of energy in the room, all of that sort of stuff. So like being able to connect with someone and have these conversations in person is much better. So I mean, I guess the bit here is like two monkeys in a cage at a Metallica concert is a good thing, but like if you made them like text each other, they'd still be stressed, right?
Perfect.
Like
That's what the bit is.
Well, I have a question. Will you guys be my monkey buddies?
hell
I'd love
yeah.
to be your monkey buddy. I'd love for you to be inside me, Jordan. That's our show. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
All right.